Hello guys, what's going on? I'm back here for another book review. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about the Treaty on Money, on Currency by Nicholas Oresme, or Bishop Oresme. It was probably the first treaty, the first economic paper about money issues, monetary issues. Specifically about, not specifically, but the biggest part of the book talks about the basement of money. This ways of I forgot the word, but anyways, I don't want to use the word fraud for now because I want to develop this a little bit more. But this practice of changing the value of the money, and it's very interesting. I heard about him in The Economic Thought Before Adam Smith by Murray Rothbard, and in the last book that I've reviewed here in the channel, The Ethics of Money Production. Your Guido Huisman quoted this guy. I'm sorry, this guy is not the best way to refer to Bishop Oresme, but anyways, Guido Huisman referred to Bishop Oresme a lot in his book. Because of this, ethical, moral, legal aspect that he brings to his book, Guido Huisman. And the thing about, the economic works that we have before maybe the late 18th century. Yeah, the late 1700s. That's 18th century, right? Anyways, 18th century. When we had Adam Smith, but before Adam Smith, Turgot, which the Academy doesn't exactly consider him an economist, but rather a physiocrat. But he talks about economy in his book. So yeah, and he writes 6 years before Adam Smith, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, and there are some other small works. But anyways, before the late 1700s, the late 18th century, everything that we have regarding economics, they're either like more of instructions, for commercial activities or management. For example, like advices for princes and for rulers in order how to do things right, or they are treated as a branch of moral, commercial moral, just like the scholastics did, or St. Thomas Aquinas did in some ways, in some aspects. Never separate piece of article, of paper that talks about the subject. And that's the case of this work by Bishop Oresme. And he talks about money in this moral, legal, ethical terms, because the majority of the book talks about the practice of the basement, of changing the value of the currency, of the coin, of the money. So yeah, and another interesting thing is that this book, I don't know if I can call book, it's more of a collection of manuscripts, as the translator says. But we don't have, a mosquito. We don't have access to the original manuscripts. So all that we have are 3 copies, from 3 different authors and of 3 different styles, writing styles and presentation styles. One of them is more of a private, for private discussions between professors. The other one is more of a scholar thing, to present in classrooms and all that. And the last one is more of almost like a gift. It's more elegantly written, and the words are more polite, and there is less notes on it. So yeah, but these are just 3 copies, but we don't have the original. It's lost, but they know that were written by Nicholas Oresme. But anyways, just I want to be brief, and to talk about that. And 3 things that are more important for me. I mean, before I talk about the book itself, I want to talk about writing style. I always like to talk about writing style. It's a very simple book to understand. I think that literally everyone can understand it. You don't have to, understand economics or money or to, have a great knowledge of the English language to understand that. It's pretty easy to understand, and it's interesting because this version that I read on Kindle, it's a PDF that I downloaded from the Mises Institute. It comes with the Latin version too, so it's a page in Latin and a page in English, a page in Latin, a page in language. Oh my god, a page in Latin and a page in English, a page in Latin and a page in English, and goes on. So that's very interesting. I don't know Latin, so I read in English, but that's interesting if you understand Latin to read on the the version that it's closer to the original text, which was written in Latin. And I forgot to say one more thing. I'm sorry. Nicholas Oresme, Bishop Oresme, was the bishop from Lisieux, and Lisieux is the city from Santa Teresa de Lisieux, Santa Teresinha de Lisieux. I don't know how to say that in English. Maybe Saint Teresa. I don't know how you guys say, but anyways, that's another interesting thing. So yeah, he wrote this book in the 1300s, so it's almost like 1,000-year book. Almost 1,000-year book. 700 years, something like that. And yeah, so that was more of a technical informations about the author. But about the subject of the book, three things. There were three things that caught my eye, and I thought that was the most interesting about this book, which was very intuitive, logical understanding that he has, and that the Austrian School of Economics has until today, and some other schools, maybe the classic school have, but that we don't have at all today in mainstream economics, for example. So the first one is money as a good. He understands money as a good, as like every other money, in terms of the consequences, in terms of measurements. So if the supply and demand law applies for every good, it applies to money too. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, he doesn't understand money as something that's, as I said in the Ethics of Money Production Review, as something as a alien good to the other goods, as something of another species. Money is a good, but it's a very specific good. It's not something that's outside of the realm of goods. And Bishop Oresme understands that. That's the first interesting thing. Another interesting thing, and as I said in the beginning, is this moral, legal, ethical lens through which he sees money, in the production of money. And that's a approach that we don't have nowadays in the economic science at all. Economy seems to be like a word apart from ethics and moral, which is insane. But anyways, and he sees that, his analysis not only he shows the economic consequences of debasing money, but he also shows and explains how immoral it is to do that. And that's another interesting thing too. I'm not gonna enter in talking about details, because it's basically the same arguments from Guido Husman, but Guido Husman talks in a more detailed way, because it's almost, as I said, 1,000-year difference, and of understanding more of of this issue. But yeah, he has the same arguments that we see today the Austrians do, in a more of course a more simple way, but it's the same arguments. When you are debasing the money, when you are making clippage of the money, what you're doing is stealing people. That's fraud. The ruler cannot do that. And another thing interesting that I remember him saying is that he recognizes that the money is not a as some a lot of economists says that today. It's pretty much mainstream economics to say that, I would say. Not all the mainstream, but I don't know, maybe 50%, I would say, that understand money as a state instrument, and not as a organic good or organic instrument that arrives in the free market. And Bishop Oresme understand money as that. So he says, like, the prince, the ruler, they don't have right power over the money. The money is property of the commonwealth. It's not their property. So he understands that, like, the money comes from, not exactly comes from. He doesn't use this word, but that's the logical consequence of his argument. It is a property of society. You know, it's not something that was created by rulers. So they don't have right over it, and so they can't do whatever they want with the money. You know, and as he said, that's immoral because, you know, not only because of that, but, you know, it's stealing, and he explained the consequences of doing these things to show that changing the value of money and debasing it is stealing, you know. And one last thing is this understanding that also Bastiat has, that if something is immoral and you should not do it, almost inevitably, not to say always, inevitably, will generate bad consequences for everyone. That's also very interesting. Nowadays we have this notion that, you know, that's some immoral thing, but people will make more good than harm. You know, we think like with, for example, abortion or inflation, for example. And Nicolas Oresme has this notion, because he's a bishop, of, you know, a fixed standard of moral. You know, in his case, the Christian morals. You know, I mean, not Christian morals, the moral of the Catholic Church, to be more specific. And he understands that. So, and when you act accordingly to this morals, you are acting in a fair way. The consequences are good, necessarily good, because fairness, justice, aligns with goodness, you know. So if you're being unfair, if you're being unjust, if you're being unethical, if you're being immoral, all these things will lead to bad consequences. Even if you have some good consequences that are, you know, restrict to a small group of people, you know, that win in the you know, some people will have to lose in order to this restrict group of people to win. That's what he wants to talk about it. And that's a very interesting insight, you know, that we kind of lost nowadays. And yeah, that's very interesting. And he even quotes quote's not the word for that, I'm sorry, but he talks about some historical examples of the debasement of money. He talks about, for example, the Roman Empire, and one of the economic causes of the fall of the Roman Empire, you know, was the debasement of their currency, you know, which make the government unstable, you know, as it happens nowadays, you know, as we see, for example, in Africa, or, you know, some great European countries, for example, Germany before World War II, and United States in the previous years, especially in during COVID and all that, you know. What I'm saying, like, seeing their power being relatively smaller than it was, you know, from the 20th century until, you know, like 5, 6, 7 years ago. That's what I'm saying. And you know, he talks about, he shows, he quotes from, you know, old historians that talks about it, you know. So yeah, it's a very interesting book. It's a very quick book to read. The version that I read has half of the book is his treaty, you know, the Bishop Oresme treaty, and the other part is a finance book, exchequer. I don't know how to pronounce this word, I'm sorry, but it's like a book of finance, of the finances of the British Kingdom, you know. And yeah, I didn't read this part, but anyways, it's worth reading the treaty, because it's so interesting. As I said, it's such an easy language to understand, and it's so nice to see how witty he is, you know, and to be able to see that and systemize that, you know, in a collection of papers, of manuscripts, the way he did, in the presentation that he did. That was very interesting. So yeah, that was it. That was the video. Feel free to leave your opinion on the comments and say if you like it or not. Bye bye, guys. Have a blessed day.